Oh, megaknight, where do I begin? This guy is probably the most hated card in Clash Royale history, with many overleveled megaknights causing generational trauma throughout mid-ladder. But the more you go up in ladder, the less you see this guy. But why? Well, in this video, I aim to answer that question, and how it's connected to the concept of noob stomping, as well as much more, including his basics and, of course, his evolution. Let me first address the elephant in the room. I am usually a Brawl Stars YouTuber, and here I am making a Clash video. Well, to be fair, I actually used to be a Clash channel long ago, but I quit the game. Well, now I'm back, though quite rusty and with quite a skill issue. Well, sort of back. Think of this video like a pilot to a TV series. If it performs very well, I'll continue making PowerPoints on Clash. If it performs poorly, we'll treat this video like it was a bad dream. Let's start out with the basics. Megaknight is a 7 elixir legendary card. He is quite tanky with over 5,800 health at level 15. With that high of a health, you wouldn't think that he would be a splash card, right? But you would be wrong, as his main attack has pretty solid splash, though the damage is pretty mediocre as a result. Megaknight also has spawn damage like Royal Delivery and Ewiz, but much more powerful, dealing nearly twice his main attack's damage and giving knockback. He also has a regular jump mechanic which only activates when enemies are 3.5 to 5 total tiles away from him. The jump takes 0.9 seconds to execute, but gives double damage than his main attack, while also inflicting knockback. With that out of the way, we can talk a little bit more about this abomination known as megaknight. I mean, just looking at the basics, we can see that megaknight, by all accounts, looks broken. I mean, if we do a quick comparison to his fellow tank, P.E.K.K.A, megaknight seems to wash her with the jump mechanic, and of course, splash damage. And at lower trophy levels, this is quite the case. You'll see megaknight a lot more than you do P.E.K.K.A in mid-ladder, and basically over any other card. But why is this? Well, it all has to do with the topic of noob stomping. It's in the name, but noob stomping basically refers to something that is especially broken when used against lower skilled players. But the higher the skill level, the worse it gets. If you play Brawl Stars, I like to compare Megaknight to Edgar in this way, with both of them being perfect examples of noob stompers. So why is Megaknight a noob stomper? Well, first of all, his stats. High elixir tanks are always a tricky opponent at lower skill levels, as your enemies tend to go into an elixir deficit when facing off against the tank to try and kill them, since all they're thinking about doing is simply killing the tank, not about elixir conservation. And this is especially true for Megaknight. The problem with some of the other tanks in the game is that you can simply plop down a swarm card and they'll be cooked, with the chief example of course being P.E.K.K.A. But due to the fact that Megaknight has splash, suddenly things get more complicated. You can't just plop down a Skelly army or Goblin gang and walk away. You have to actually defend against the Megaknight with a combination of cards. And this is what gets a lot of people, as they think they can just take down the Megaknight with one card, when in 90% of cases, you'll need some combination of cards to succeed. Another reason why he's so good is that he's excellent for counter pushing. If your enemy has a pretty serious push against you, that they've expended quite a bit of elixir on, often you can just put down a Megaknight and deal with it quite well, since Megaknight is such a great defensive card. And since Megaknight is so tanky, he can start being a huge threat on offense, and suddenly, your opponent is on the defensive, with not much elixir left to properly defend, and gets punished as a result. And of course, there's the overleveling problem. See, people tend to overlevel certain cards that they believe are very good. And, well, a lot of people think Megaknight is very good. What's more, it's certain cards that aren't treated the same when it comes to leveling. Let's take, you guessed it, P.E.K.K.A and Megaknight, for example. P.E.K.K.A.'s biggest counter is probably the skeleton army for obvious reasons. Whether you're base level or level 15, it doesn't matter. You're going to die against a skeleton army. Mega Knight's biggest counter is probably the P.E.K.K.A. for, well, reasons that I'll get into later. And however, there's a big difference between a base level and a level 15 Mega Knight in its matchup against the P.E.K.K.A. and how long it survives. This may not be the greatest example, but you get the point. There's a lot more value in upgrading the Mega Knight and splash cards in general, which is why you often see cards like the Wizard and Witch so often over-leveled in mid-ladder. So with this in mind, it's no wonder that Mega Knight is such a noob stomper at mid-ladder. Even if you did know how to face off against him, what are you going to do against a level 15 Mega Knight? Yeah, at that point just switch to Brawl Stars, which you should probably do anyway. Anyway, it's extremely difficult to get rid of high-leveled Mega Knights, even with the traditional counters, like Inferno Towers, P.E.K.K.A.s, or Mini P.E.K.K.A.s, simply because they're just not leveled high enough. I mean, overall, in mid-ladder, Mega Knight is an absolute menace to face off against. Combine a lack of knowledge on how to counter him, a lack of skill in general, and an over-leveled Mega Knight, and you get the most hated card in the game. But why hasn't he received a single nerf since his EVO? Surely he would be nerfed multiple times. Well, I'm sure all of you guys are wondering why I'm asking this question, since I already mentioned in this video he's a noob stomper. But come on, cut me some slack. I need a nice segue to the next part of the video. Now that we talked about why exactly Mega Knight is so good in mid-ladder, it's time to talk about why he fizzles out in popularity, but more importantly, usability when it comes to the top of the top. First, let's talk about kiting. I'm sure you guys know what that is, but for a short explanation, it's basically placing troops in a certain way as to distract a particularly annoying enemy troop. This can be for a variety of reasons, like stalling, killing without using a lot of elixir, or all the way to activating the King Tower. Mega Knight has a pretty unique relationship to kiting, and it all has to do with his jump mechanic. Mega Knight's jump mechanic takes him quite far, and that's the whole point when kiting him, as you can take what is usually his strength and turn it against him. You can kite the Mega Knight far much quicker, exploiting the jump mechanic, and bringing him straight for an up-close meeting to the King Tower. This is something that a lot of lower level players don't usually do, or even know about. And just to be clear, by saying lower level players, I'm also including myself in that bracket. I'm pretty trash at this game. But that's not all. Mega Knight is also countered in a lot more ways. Let's start out with the obvious. Tanky cards who pack a punch. Cards like P.E.K.K.A., Mini P.E.K.K.A., Giant Skelly are extremely good against Mega Knight for a couple of reasons. Mega Knight often relies on three things: tankiness, splash, and damage. These guys nullify all three, with having a good to insane health, being single units, and dealing even more damage than Mega Knight, including the Giant Skelly Bomb, of course. Of course, there's even more counters like towers such as Inferno Tower, who extremely hard counter the Mega Knight. And who can forget about air cards such as Inferno Dragon and Minion Horde, who can make the Mega Knight disappear like Clash Royale players after going outside. However, most of the time, you should be able to deal with these threats, for one important reason: they are solitary. This is why one of, if not the best way to deal with the Mega Knight is to use a combination of multiple troops. One really good way is to use a tanky short-range guy to keep the Mega Knight occupied, and pair it with a long-range guy to snipe from a distance. An example of this could be with a Knight and a Dark Goblin, which is a cheap, easy way to get a positive elixir trait to beat the Mega Knight. You can also use other combos like a Tower and Sniper card, or just go the old-fashioned route with something like a Mini P.E.K.K.A., but also keeping a spell ready just in case. Another important thing to keep in mind with Mega Knight is understanding his jumps. Even a traditional counter like Mini P.E.K.K.A. if you place it far enough from the Mega Knight, can die to Mega Knight simply because of how powerful the jump is. Because of this, you have to make sure not to trigger the jump when you're not trying to kite. Because of this, you often have to place cards right on top of the Mega Knight or within the 3.5 tile radius. Okay, I've said that 3 times in a row, I need to stop. Anyway, you can actually take what I just said to your advantage with swarm cards. Sure, Mega Knight has splash, but it isn't that great, and can easily be taken advantage of by a well-placed Skelly army or Goblin gang in combo with something else. Overall, there's a lot of ways to counter Mega Knight at higher levels. Tanks, air cards, and towers are all uniquely suited to counter Mega Knight. However, there's a lot more ways to counter him, like using his jump mechanic to your advantage for kiting, and using combinations of cards to take him down. Of course, when defending against the Mega Knight, you should always try to prevent the jump, and enlist the help of your towers, as just a Valk and tower can take down the Mega Knight by themselves. Another reason Mega Knight doesn't do great at higher levels is more fundamental, not understanding what the Mega Knight's role is. Mega Knight is not someone you just spam at the bridge, or in other words, some win condition. Mega Knight is a defensive beast, and should mostly be used on defense. Most of the time, you don't want to base the push around the Mega Knight. For offense, Mega Knight is, as I said earlier, great at counter pushing. As a result, you should use Mega Knight as a supporting piece for your actual win condition, like Hog Rider for example, and use the Mega Knight as sort of a bodyguard, something most mid-ladder players don't understand. Finally, let's talk about the evolution. This is truly one of the evolutions of all time. As someone without a singular evolution due to my aforementioned absence, imagine my surprise when using this guy in a challenge and he suddenly throws the enemies into the air. But on the topic of the Evo, this is just simply an extension of his regular form. Against your average Joe, this is just an even more annoying, broken card that's even more difficult to counter. It makes an already frustrating card into an even more frustrating card that can seem impossible to counter, and feel even more over-leveled than usual. However, at the top level, it's just not enough to make him really meta. It makes him better than he was before, of course, but it's still counterable in sort of the usual ways, with just a little more effort. And of course, he isn't the only Evo in the game, is he? Overall, Mega Knight is quite the paradox. He's basically unbeatable at a mid-ladder level, and the most hated card by far by players there. However, all this hatred and power dissipates the higher up you go, with higher knowledge and skill in knowing how to counter the Mega Knight, truly proving Mega Knight as the Edgar of Clash Royale, and giving him the crown of the ultimate noob stomper. A huge thank you to newglance for helping me out with this ambitious video. And as always, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.